Looking for a home that keeps you connected to Silicon Valley without the usual barriers to entry? The Gates in Morgan Hill by City Ventures is a walkable neighborhood near downtown restaurants, outdoor trails, and an easy commute to the Bay Area. It's a small town setting with access to major career hubs. Every home is all electric with buyer-owned solar included. With limited availability, now's the time to take a closer look. Discover your new home at cityventures.com. That's cityventures.com.
Yeah, alright. So, this week, I thought we'd bring up something that I've been thinking about quite a lot at the minute, and it's because of some of the TV shows I've been watching, some of the conversations I've been having with people, and I thought it'd be good to bring up with you because it means that we can, as a show, it means we can kind of go down a slightly different avenue, and we can discuss. I don't want to get into true crime and stuff like that, because it's kind of boring, but I like the idea that the stuff that's now called true crime, your big cases like Jimmy Savile, he's a big case. We covered him on Truth Seeking recently. Madeleine McCann, another big case. There's some of the English ones. Then you've got the girl that got abducted from a cellar and dragged out of a window, but didn't break any of the spider webs. But apparently it was a brother. That one. I can't remember her name, but she was like a beauty pageant girl. And, serial killers and that. And we're going to look at serial killers this week because I like the idea that they're not real, innit? I'm quite obsessed at the minute with the idea that they're not real. That they aren't what we're told they are. And I think there's something there to be seen because they seem to be, for whatever reason, very influential, and it's as if we have to know about them. Everybody knows about Ted Bundy and who he was and things like that, just like everybody knows about Hitler. So is there a hidden reason as to why everybody needs to know about that? Was he something else? Did he represent something else? It's that kind of idea. So I'm hoping that this might become like the base episode, the foundation, if you like, for maybe a new series throughout these, not starting a new show, but a new series throughout it that we can come to every now and then. Like you've got the Here's Hows every week, you've got the Movie Madnesses, and you've also got some of the Movie Madness ones. They're now coming to Patreon. There's Patreon exclusive episodes now, if you didn't know, where you can join Patreon. The link will be in the description to this, and give a couple of quid a month, and then you get access to different shows and the video versions of these. But I'm thinking maybe not focusing on true crime, but looking at true crime and being in the sense that none of it's real. None of it's true. Don't take any of it as fact. What else was going on at them times, But it's not just true crime. We can go into things like MK Ultra and the CIA and other CIA operations and see what was going on at the time. And that's still interesting. It's still stuff that I find interesting. And that's all these are. This is just things that I find interesting. Like the people that fuck dogs, the Dog Botherers episode, that's not conspiracy. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just, I find that fascinating that someone could look at one Labrador and think, not for me. But look at another Labrador and be like, whoa. Because the legs are not. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's fucked, innit? And a lot of this has come about with the serial killer stuff because I've been learning a bit about MK Ultra recently because I wanted to do a bit of that on Truth Seeking and try and get into that. So I needed to go back over it again, but I haven't been keeping any notes, so I want to go do it properly, and we'll have a look at it here, and we'll probably discuss it as well with Jimmy on Truth Seeking. And I started to see a lot of similarities though with it, with a lot of other stories from America, and then I've been watching a few true crime things like the John Wayne Gacy thing on Netflix and that, and I've seen some bits within that seem very similar to the MK Ultra stuff, and it's a bit weird. I keep getting told, innit? My missus keeps telling me it's got nothing to do with any of it. More than likely, it's got nothing to do with any of it. But let's see what you guys think of it. We'll have a song and then we'll get into it. This is "Sorry" by Joel Ortiz and King Crooked. So I figure we should start off with a brief explanation of MK Ultra, or a little bit about it, because it might not be something on the tip of everyone's tongue, You don't want to get it mixed up with the Montauk Project. It's not really to do with psychic powers or monsters or anything like that. But it was an American project to, if you like, try and create super soldiers, if you want to look at it that way. They were trying to break people's brains and their psyches so that they become programmable, like little robot men and that. Like what the Romans had, except instead of making them out of tin, maybe the Americans wanted to make them out of flesh and bone, and or outsource production. to the working classes of the country, so they can keep churning out people and children, so that they can break the minds of these children through, TV or drugs or whatever it is, so that they can then use these children when they grow up to perform possibly nefarious tasks, because they experimented with trauma, like rape and that, and beating them, and drugs, and the whole point of it was to try and make the brains of mostly unsuspecting people quite, pliable, malleable, all in the hopes of, well, it seems initially it was all in the hopes of getting out of paying retirement packages to the staff of the CIA, because they had a bit of a problem with ex-agents because they knew too much, so they never really could retire. Like a policeman's never off duty, do you know what I mean? Like someone that was in the CIA and knows all of the CIA's stuff, no matter how hard they try, is always going to be in the CIA because they know so much about it. They could just be called on, they're a threat. Once you retire realistically from a secret service, you're then a threat to that secret service, because somebody could come along and be like, that retirement package where you only get 20 grand a year. Yeah, well, what if we was to give you 3 million a year and you tell us what you know? And a lot of people would probably go, you know what, brilliant. I'll probably do that, yeah, because I've been travelling around all of South America killing children for the president of the United States, and I don't really know why. I was only killing the ones that they didn't want to sleep with, which is nice, But it's nice that he wasn't sleeping with them all, or she wasn't sleeping with them all, depending on where you're listening to this in the timeline. Maybe you're listening to this in 20 years' time. Odds are there's been a woman. If this carries on for this long, but. I feel quite bad about it, but they never gave me much for it. They just told me, that was the job, get on with it, compartmentalise. And a lot of it is compartmentalised, so they don't know why they're doing it, potentially. But they still knew they were doing it, which is dangerous, because if they've put 2 and 2 together and got 6, then they could give the wrong information, but with still some of the right information in there, enough maybe to cause a problem. But when they would retire, apparently they would be watched from afar, they'd be spied on. So it's that constant worry that they'd flip to the other side, whatever that other side was at the time. A lot of people would say Russia or China, but when you actually look into some of the MK Ultra stuff, it makes you start to think that the CIA's main enemy was the American population, just the general American public. And if the American public had become aware of all this sooner, then more than likely they would have revolted, I would hope, or at least have made it very difficult for the secret agencies to carry on operating in the shadows, which could explain why they changed it from the OSS to the CIA, change all the paperwork over, and then all of a sudden we no longer do that because we're not them. No, we don't do that, we do this, But that's just saying that. But I mean, one good thing about having CIA operatives spy on other CIA operatives is it probably led to the mad cartoon, Spy versus Spy. But it which is nice, and I did want to get that tattooed, but instead of him holding a Tommy gun, I wanted him holding a Nike tick, because I thought it would look cool, and I'm quite glad I never got that. But if someone out there wants to get that, and then tag me in a picture, But the fucking, I'm getting off topic there, the nice thing is that it was keeping people in jobs, so the more people would retire, you would have to then replace that person, and hire on someone else to then spy on that person who's now retired. And that might be a way they worked up, we know this. We know John from, Department 551 isn't a bad guy. He's not going to do anything weird. He just wants to water his potatoes all day and sit in the garden. So we'll set off little Kim. She's got a new job, and not that little Kim. It's a different little Kim. She's actually quite fat. It's an ironic name. And Kimmy's there, and she's watching. And they're like, we can send her out because it'll be good training for her to not get caught. She's not in any danger. Whatever his name was that is looking after the potatoes, because we've already forgotten about him because we burnt all the paperwork. We don't know his name anymore, but he'll be all right, because if he does clock on, so he might just go and let her know and play with her a little bit, and that'll be good. It'll be good for him to learn. Anyway, the MK Ultra stuff. So one of the things they would do is they'd use prostitutes. Which, if we wanted to, we can tie that in with another serial killer, well, the first serial killer, if you like, of the show, Jack the Ripper. Except they weren't really killing the prozzies. Instead, what they'd do is they'd they'd get the sex workers to slip drugs, mostly LSD, acid, into the Marks, or Johns, as the Halls for Hire would call them, which is weird, really, because they're two very generic men's names that mean victim or buyer, purchaser, prey, basically. And I honestly, I don't get why people would name the kids Mark or John, knowing that, you got John Doe, which is a dead body nobody knows, or a Mark, which is someone you can easily make money out of and manipulate. So I don't get why you would name your kids after those sort of things. But eventually, I know they're just going to change it anyway if them names go out of fashion. And I mean, hopefully, John's supposed to mean Jack, so hopefully it'll never be a Jack Doe. Yeah, that's not good for me. But I mean, maybe in the future they'll just call them Harrys or something, because the name Mark and John will disappear, and they'll change the name of the Gospels as well. So Harry, Mark, Luke, Steve, and John will then be Harry, Michael, Luke, Steve, and Graham. The 5 Gospels. But, the name dies out in it. Either way, I'm getting lost. Or maybe, if feminists, because if you are listening to this in 20 years' time, maybe we have had America has had a female president, because we've had female prime ministers. Maybe the feminists get their way, and all of Marks will then be called Maries, like they're all from Liverpool or something. But instead of them being, not like, that's not like a transgender thing. Don't be looking into that like that. I just mean, instead, they'll just change the nomenclature, the way we use language, the words. So Marie will come from Mark, and it'll all come round like that and eat itself and mean the same thing, but instead it'll be women's names. So instead of like having a John Doe, an unknown entity, it'll be like a Jane Doe. They'll start introducing things like that, and maybe they already have. Who knows? But we'll get more onto the feminine movement in a little bit and their potential involvement in serial killers. I've got a little bit of that jotted down. Now, I should probably explain why Jack the Ripper is relevant. So, not only is he the proto-serial killer, if you like, the first, the big daddy serial killer. He had the full get-up, didn't he? He had the top hat and cape. So you know that he was, business with the top hat, and a villain because he wore a cape. I imagine he had a cane as well, one of them canes with a hidden sword inside. But he was a serial killer with ties to very influential people, supposedly, like Aleister Crowley and some of the people he hung around with, supposedly. Now, it's also a way that I believe the big they, of the way that they have used prostitutes in order to be able to mould society to the way they see fit. Because we see it in modern day, innit? Now they'll get criminals and they use them to create fear, because if you think about it, all the money there is in drug dealing or in organising, dog fights or something in industrial estates, there's loads of money in that, yet people don't do it because society's going to look down on them. It's illegal, yeah, and a lot of people will say it brings a community down, which is the same as how prostitution was viewed in the Ripper times. Jack the Ripper times, not the Yorkshire Ripper times. Ripper times sounds like a really good newsletter name, though, if anyone wants that, to make up a load of stories about dead women and put it out as if someone's died. Maybe as a birthday message, you could put that out, on her 30th birthday, she got killed by, whoever, the different Ripper, the Lancashire Ripper, the Ripper times. Anyway, this might be a bit of an airy-fairy episode, this, guys. I mean, a bit of there's not a lot of research gone into this. This is going to be mostly my thinkings, my thoughts with the topic. So we encourage us to, when we do research these things in the later weeks, we've got something to fall back on and to build on. So, thinking about prostitutes, right, they could make loads of money, which I think I've mentioned this before, this thought. The prosies can make a ton of money, innit? It's untaxed. It obviously is self-employed some of the time. They're working indoors some of the time, when they want, I guess. They're able to work when they want, time-wise. Potentially working where, as well, in an area they want, and with whom they choose, you would hope. But they didn't want that. They didn't. The prostitution, in the eyes of the big they, prostitution breeds autonomy, right? And that would delay their plans. So They may have rounded up a few exotic massagers, and killed them in brutal ways all in the same night, and then put them on ice because they used to import ice back then. That's why they were importing ice, because it seems like a weird thing to start to introduce to people. But if you're using it to hide the bodies of prostitutes that you've killed, so that you can have a massive media campaign and spread stories through history about a guy in a cape killing women and butchering them in houses, then that would be a good reason to have that ice, and a good way to use that ice as well. So they've got these women on ice, and then they start putting them out every few days or every couple of weeks, saying, "Oh, Jack the Ripper strikes again." This guy that we never knew who he was and still don't know who he was. No one has a clue. And by claiming that Jack only killed the ladies of the night, they were bound to scare away some prostitutes from where they were operating, where this was happening, to move them to other areas, probably stop a lot of women from becoming prostitutes because of the fear, meaning, right, that there's less money reaching the poorer people of society, and that they remain in control. This shows us, right, that a serial killer doesn't necessarily have to be real, as it's described in history or in the news in modern day. Only the story has to survive. A serial killer is just a means to an end. Or is there something more going on? Let's have a song, and maybe we'll find this out. This is Crooked Smile by J. Cole and TLC. So, who could the serial killers have been? Scientists, like psychiatrists, and forensic psychiatrists tell us that things like a close relationship with the mother, or a distant relationship with the mother, or getting too many hugs, or not enough hugs and too many kisses, not enough kisses, or getting molested as a child, or not getting molested as a child and instead seeing the siblings getting molested as a child. So, which is it? But they say all these things are ingredients in creating a serial killer. I mean, amongst other things. But to me, it sort of feels like they could have also said that they all owned a red car, and the colour red has effects on the human brain, as we've learnt through marketing, and because there was so much red, they all went on to kill people. Or they could say that, they all had weird haircuts, and that affects the energy from the world and the universe that gets into the brain, and because they all had bowl cuts, which is the modern thing now for scaring people, anyone with a bowl cut is dangerous, rather than just, a snappy dresser. But they're like, they've all got the equivalent of the 70s bowl cut or whatever would be looked down on then. And like, that gives them these weird things in the brain that means they go on to kill people because they've all got that weird haircut. You could have picked up on anything, and you could have I think if you get a group of 10 people from all around the world, you can probably find at least 5 things that link those people together. Now, maybe it is the molestation as a child. That's because it's quite rare, That's not something that's happening all the time. But maybe it was back then. Maybe it was in these areas of America, and not everybody else has gone on to become serial killers. They've just gone on to be like, I hated it when my mum and dad did that to me. I'm not going to have kids because, I don't want to end up doing it to them because I'll think it's normal. Or I'm purposely not going to do it to my kids, and I'll do it to my neighbour's kids instead because, I've got to look after my children. However they turned out, I just think it's a load of shit, really. It's far too convenient. The reasons that they give, they're always the sort of thing as well that would be shameful to a person. Now, I'm not saying that if your dad used to tongue kiss your arsehole that you should feel ashamed. I just want to be very, very clear with that, innit? Your dad should be ashamed because it's a horrific thing to do to a person, to a child, and to a person that doesn't want it or know it's coming. That's an awful thing to do. It should be your dad that's ashamed, not you. But if your uncle did used to suck on your balls as you fell asleep when you were a prepubescent boy, then that is the sort of dark secret you would want to keep to yourself. Not because you should, but because you think, I shouldn't tell people this. And, you're not going to watch one of these mockumentaries, let's call them, on Jeffrey Dahmer, let's say, and say, oh my God, that could have been me, and turn to the person next to you and be like, oh, this all happened to me. I'm in danger of killing you. It's not going to happen because you're not going to admit to my auntie used to fucking flick frozen peas against my arsehole till they'd go in occasionally while she flicked her own bean. It's not going to come up in conversation, and it just seems another way that the media's been used to condition people. Not many people are going to watch the programmes about serial killers and point at the telly like that fucking Who's That Pokemon meme, spit the cereal out and shout ditto. Are they? It's just not going to... They're not going to do it with it. It's going to be something they've either repressed or they're just going to genuinely just want to keep to themselves out of this shame that the media has taught them to have. Because, if you talk about this, people will think you're a nutter. It doesn't necessarily. They'll just think, fucking hell, you've had a rough life and your dad's a dickhead or your uncle's a gobshite or your auntie's a cunt, or your mum. Mums can do it too. I've seen a TV show where a mum was doing it, I mean, I say TV show. It's a thing I found on the internet, and the children were adults, so it didn't seem too bad. To be honest, it was quite enjoyable. But I only watched about the first 30 seconds or so. I didn't really see where it was going. Anyway, considering the stories that do come out regularly as well about like boarding schools, convalescents, prisons, and places for orphanages, it seems like torture and sexual atrocities were rife at that time and in those places. So whoever they are, they won't want these stories getting out. So you can easily imagine the world being chock full of serial killers if all of these things that forensic psychiatrists, scientists and psychiatrists now all say are the cause that make you become a serial killer. They'd be all over the place, mate, but they're not. But what if a serial killer isn't just one person? Because I've often thought maybe they're a group of people, and some of them have said things that make you think that they didn't work alone. It's like some of the quotes from Richard Ramirez. I can't remember exactly what they were, but I remember watching a documentary on him, and he gave these quotes, and it made it seem like he wasn't working alone. I think you could say he believed he was working with the devil or whatever and that, but ignoring the esoteric stuff, it does seem like these people could easily be working in groups. David Berkowitz, he the son of Sam, he made it seem like he wasn't working alone, because the media was like, the dog next door was telling him to kill people and to do stuff. But around the time of both of these fellas was the Satanic Panic, which we'll look into later in a different episode. But the dog thing, we know that there was technology that the Americans and the Russians were using to drive people insane. We know that there are people who've had tooth fillings that have been able to pick up radio signals and hear messages in their heads. So what if there's things where they've been doing this to try and capture people in their heads, and people that might be down, they might be depressed, they might just be already have a natural propensity to be a mentalist, to just be fucked. But they're hearing it because it's actually real, but the person who's clocked on, they're listening to this. Fucking hell, they can hear it. I'll tell them I'm the dog, because I can't tell them I'm the guy in the van that follows them around everywhere, because then the game's up, But, I mean, we'll give a little bit about the Satanic Panic. It was this time where loads of people were worried that devil worshippers and Satanists were just lurking around every corner, waiting to kill people. But all of that it's got to be purely because of the newspapers and the telly at the time. Newspapers and TV that we now look at as a means of propagandising a country, manipulating people into seeing things that just aren't there, just because they've been told to think that way. People don't want to think for themselves, to spot problems in the stories being told to them. A lot of the time, people just want to be told, that's the way it is. And then you can move on with the life, meaning that the lies can continue. Some of these brainwashing tactics used by MKUltra seem to be quite similar to Charles Manson. Whilst not a serial killer, it does seem to show that some of these, let's call them the American villains, have got something in common with the brainwashing that was happening at the time, that was funded by an American Secret Service. Even if the Satanic Panic was a real threat, it makes sense that somebody intelligent would be using it to their advantage. In the same way now with terrorism, domestic terrorism, and things like that, there's been things have come into place after that where you could think to yourself, well, this wouldn't have happened without the terrorism that we were told, but then they kind of went quiet on that afterwards, and that all of that seemed to just stop after these laws were brought in, and there's other things within these laws, and not just in England, but in other countries, in America, let's say, Canada, it seems to be a thing across the board. Something gets used, and it's bizarre, isn't it? Like, you've got the whole, there was a mass shooting somewhere, and it got live streamed, and then after that you could only live stream if you had over 1,000 subscribers on something. I think that was on YouTube. So there's things like that, man, where it's a bit, well, they needed a reason to stop that, because people could just say whatever they want and spread whatever they want, which was the whole point of it at the time. But then it's like the world shifted, something changed. But getting back to the Satanic Panic thing, right, it does make sense that someone would use it for their own benefit. Because I know obviously you've got the journalists and the editors who are using it for the monetary gain and to build their own reputation and build their careers, but why wouldn't someone prey on these psychopaths who, may have already killed a couple people or attacked people or whatever, and use them, cultivate them, nurture them, if you like, in order to use them to commit useful crimes, kill the children of people involved in unions, kill people that stood to challenge the status quo, kill people to help bring about new laws and restrictions that could be used to control an area. The CIA and the FBI never used to share information, apparently, and according to some, they still don't like to. So then you have a problem that arises in a lot of stories about serial killers. Included within that, I suppose, within the same, if you put it in a little chart, you could include it in the data and that there was police departments for different states and different counties didn't share information. So could there have been a group of people that were set to profit off of the conglomeration of data who masterminded horrific crimes or completely fabricated horrific crimes, or even found lots of random unrelated crimes and acts of violence and tied them all together with an actor or a stooge pigeon of a person, making them take on the role of the serial killer, or even worse, an unsuspecting person, innit? Maybe even a revolutionary of some sort that they were hoping to shut up and turn the public against before their teachings or messages reached the people. Maybe we should widen the net for the rest of this show of the term serial killers to include domestic terrorists like Ted Kaczynski, who I'm sure he tried to inform people about a problem before it happened and then he got ridiculed. But I might be getting him mixed up with the anthrax guy as well, who sent around packets of anthrax to try and stop something from happening, and then I think 9/11 happened, and some people conflate the two things as being, linked together to try and stop something, but other people link 9/11 and possibly the anthrax thing, I'm not sure, with the whole disclosure event that was supposed to happen around that time of the year, where they were supposed to come out and be like, there are aliens, and they're here with us. So you got to take it with a pinch of salt, and season it to your liking, guys. That's what you've got to do with the world. You'd be like, I like a bit of this and I like a bit of that. Now reality I don't understand, but I do like this and I like this. So I'm going to build my whole worldview around these two things. And that's what I'm trying to do for you. This is like a catalogue. This show is like a catalogue of realities. And I'm trying to give you a little bit of mine. So you can be like, well, I don't like all the stuff you say about the Greys. That's terrifying. The idea that there's just something lingering in the room, watching me all the time and messing with machines in the sky. That change how you see things. I don't like that, Jack. That's quite scary, that world around you. I'm not into that. But I do like the idea that they're harvesting gold from our toilets, so I'll have that bit, and I'll have this bit here about the serial killers not being real. And fuck it, I'll even buy that dinosaurs never existed as well, so I'll build my worldview on that now. And that is my goal. That's what I want. I just want you to see the world and enjoy the world like I do. That's the whole point of this, I guess. And that's what the media are trying to do, though, but in a negative way. They're not giving you the choice. They're not really giving you. They're only giving you the choice of this or that. I'm giving you a whole buffet of things to pick from, innit? And by giving you this or that, it seems like a great way of controlling the narrative of some events to make sure that some people don't clock onto the truth. That's the truth, not the truth. If you want the truth, you've got to listen to truth seeking, or to even start to question what was really happening at the time. Anyway, let's have a song. This is This is You Don't Know by the 10th Dan and Delicatees. So the Satanic Panic, it's often associated with serial killers, but a lot of the documentaries I've watched about them, they talk about it as if they're trying to use the Satanic Panic to say it was very of the time, but no one really tries to say who these other people were that were trying to take part in these rituals, because according to a lot of them, these rituals were normal and everyone was doing it. But these ones here are just the weirdos associated with it who tarnished the name of the Satanic Panic, with, you know, not like the name itself is already doing that. But who was leading them? It's not really said, and I think that is pretty suspicious, isn't it? But I don't know too much about it either, so we're going to try and do an episode or two on that. But I'll tell you what I think. I think that some form of group, just for ease and simplicity, we're going to imagine it's the CIA. So the CIA is using MK Ultra techniques on people to see if they can create their sleeper agents, whilst also messing with people that they've spiked with LSD to see what they can make them do. You know, generally just driving people mental in it to see what happens. And I think they were finding people who were already mad, and then giving them just that little push, you know, just get them arrested, experiment on them in prison maybe, you know, possibly while they're in prison have them beaten and raped in there over and over and over in order to break the brains, and then bring them into a little room and be like, you know, fucking follow the watch. No, you're not ready yet. Watch the spiral. No, he's not ready yet. Lick this frog. He licks the frog, and then we've got him. Because, you know, you can't... I imagine it was a lot easier to sneak frogs into a prison than you know, a sheet of LSD, because you could sneak in the frog spawn in a little boba tea drink kind of thing, and then pour it down the grid or into a specific pipe that doesn't really go anywhere. Fill it with a bit of water, and then the frogs can grow, and then you can time your MK Ultra sessions with the gestation period of your average toad. But they might have been doing all of this, and then when all of the trauma hits and they've made them like little pliable, but when they've turned the brains into mush, basically, they've then made the little hitmen, right? And the satanic stuff, torturing goats and slitting things open and stuff and doing all the chanting and that's a good way to get someone into like a hypnotic state. So you do chanting and counting down and all. Count down from 10, sit in this triangle and stab the goat with the scissors. You know, that seems like if you're going to keep doing this, we'll add a different step, you know. Like, imagine the cha-cha slide, but instead of him, you do the dance. After he says slide to the left, you slide to the left. Imagine it was like the cha-cha slide was more like bop it. And you've got to remember the sequence of dance moves, but them sequence of dance moves start getting darker and darker and darker until the point where you're killing a woman in, you know, like a church or something, and spreading the blood across the wall and writing messages in their entrails. Now, I think that a lot of the separation of American states, that seems to have a lot to do with serial killers as well, getting away from the Satanic Panic and that. You know, there's that quote in there from Winston Churchill saying, you know, never waste a good crisis. But what if you create the crisis, you create the problem, you know, so that you can implement a way to fix the problem that never existed, just so you can have more control. Like when high school teachers sell cigs to the popular kids at school so that they can later catch them kids smoking on school grounds, give them a detention and get themselves some overtime pay. Yeah, I know what I'm suggesting here isn't anything groundbreaking. It's been believed for years that there is someone out there pulling the strings so that they can gain more power over our lives. But something you got to remember about the CIA and the FBI though is that they're different, innit? They're not the same entity. They're not controlled by the same force and not coming out the same pay bucket, if you like, the same kitty of money. Like I mentioned earlier on, so what if the CIA were doing these murders in order to gain control over influential people so that they could have more power, like something like the mob would do kind of thing in films, but the FBI were chasing after him, finding the murderers and wondering, you know, what the fuck's going on here, noticing some form of pattern in the killings or in the victims, you know, they've all got brown hair, they're all 4 foot fucking 12, 5 foot, you know, they've all got green eyes and walk with a limp. 5 of them have got a cleft palate, but only this one here doesn't. And that's the one we caught them on because they slipped up here. But then that's where you've got to say, well, look, if the other 5 had a cleft palate and this one doesn't, maybe they're unrelated. Maybe the guy that killed the one that isn't like the others has nothing to do with the other guy. And then they'll be like, oh, it's a copycat killer, because they can't be like, oh, we got it completely wrong. But again, I'm getting lost. Yeah, all of this, noticing the patterns and that in the killings, this went on to become the FBI's criminal profiling system, which exists. They use that to try and find criminals based upon the patterns, which maybe in the future they'll try and use before anyone commits a crime, with facial recognition technology, different biochemistry tests they might do on children and stuff, and brain scans, MRIs and shit like that. In order to stop crime completely, like in that film with I want to say Robert De Niro, but I don't think it was Robert De Niro, where he wakes up in the future and they've eradicated toilet roll or something. I can't remember what it was called. Not Heat. I can't remember. Anyway, regardless of that, what if the FBI was doing all of the crimes, right, and then they managed to pin it on these people, all whilst planting these seeds of doubt in society, using fringe media, which the CIA didn't control, and say that the CIA were responsible for all the fucked up stuff like MKUltra and that, just so that they could carry on building their federal control systems around America. I mean, it's just a theory. It is just a theory. Let's have a song. This is When All Light Dies by Jedi Mind Tricks. So, were all the serial killer stories just concocted by the media, though? It makes sense when you realise how much money's in the news. You've got your advertising, you've got your ratings, you've got your actual paper sales, especially when they had more morning and evening edition newspapers. So if they could peddle more fear by tea time, that's more money in certain people's pockets. And that extra bit of fear means that there's a lot more wiggle room for the crowbar of freedom, which sounded an awful lot cooler in my head. I guess the crowbar would be removing the freedoms. The Jimmy of freedoms. I don't know. It sounded much better in my head, but we'll go with it. So what if the removal of freedom and the more control over life is what all of this seems aimed towards? Take your shoes off at an airport, show your genitals to the X-ray machines at an airport, wear a mask. But what if the propaganda is a lot more layered? So, just off the top of my head, we're going to look at 3 serial killers now, and who could be used in some form of way as an industry plant, if you like. So we'll start off with Fred West, notorious child killer. But what could they have made him up for? Why would they make up Fred West, By having a child killer, it's going to make people focus more on the children. And I imagine it made children seem a bit more fragile. They go from being potential minors to being nothing more than minors. Could have been been the idea that having people going around killing kids, could that have helped the public see children as vulnerable, and that could have been one of the reasons that helped to stop teachers from being allowed to beat children and making it frowned upon to beat your kids in the comfort of your own home. This could all be factors that have helped make the British public weaker as a people. Maybe not physically, but mentally. Think about all the older people, because most of my family members are in the 60s and 70s, innit? And they all seem like very different people, innit, to the people that are my age, and the people that are in between. Look at your average 30-year-old, right? Odds are they weren't getting beaten by their parents as was customary when my aunties and uncles were kids. And nowadays, it's not only rare for people to beat children, it's most likely an offence. It's gone from normal practice to a rare occurrence to a guilty pleasure, in the realms of obscurity. And maybe that could be because of how the media handled Fred West. There are other things as well you could say the media may have been trying to manipulate you about in regards to Fred West. And I'm not trying to say, the point of this isn't, Fred West was a stand-up guy, nothing like that. It's just how have they used this character to influence popular culture and people's minds? How have they manipulated you? And how are they going to continue to manipulate your children as they grow older using the news and that? Now, Fred West is remembered as the patio guy, innit? which could have been an attempt to discourage people from DIY, maybe B&Q weren't that big at the time, or to maybe, introduce the concept of DIY too. If this guy can do it and he's out killing kids all day and night and he's still got the time to lay a patio, what's stopping you? Come to, fucking home improvement centre or whatever the fuck the shops would have been called back then before, home base and whatever was knocking about. But it's also could have been a way to try and discourage and discredit landscapers in the eyes of the public, like gardeners and hard landscapers. Landscaping was probably a massive cash-in-hand business at the time, potentially meaning there was a lot of people not paying tax on the jobs that they were performing. That means that government, possibly the big they, were missing out on money, and it means that poorer people could have had more power and just had more influence in the communities that they lived in. Now, that might seem a bit far-reaching, but think about it, it's very similar to the Jack Ripper and the prostitutes. History repeats itself after all, we're always told. If the government were getting tax money from them, the government seemed to leave the people alone that pay a lot of tax, and they also seem to leave alone, though, the people that earn a lot of money. And the government don't want to leave these people alone. The government want you to believe that these people are dangerous, but not the ones that are okay to not be paying the tax. Just as a thought, I don't want to get too political because I don't understand it. Another industry, though, that Fred West was involved with was the ice cream business. He worked as an ice cream man, innit? And that's a cash-in-hand business. Always on the move as well, and probably a lot of gang-affiliated activity along with that as well, I would have thought, with ice cream and that, because it's very much territories, innit? And a lot of ice cream men probably still sell drugs from the ice cream van and that, so... and that's why they play that music. That music actually sounds fucking well good when you're off your face. This could have gone the ways of stopping ice cream men and tiptoeing the country towards the cashless society that's now on the cards no less than 60 years later. These are smart people, innit? They have these great big plans that only we can see when we look backwards through time. That's what people mean, innit, when they say you've got to watch, because, like I said, history repeats itself. Let's go across the pond, though. Let's think about Ted Bundy. If you wanted to look at the stories about him and how the media used him to manipulate the population, there's a few things they were going for. So a lot of the stories about Bundy circle around him using a cast on his arm to request help from people, and this is twofold, this. You could look at this as a way to make people look down on healthcare in a very removed way. A great way for America to keep healthcare for the wealthy instead of funded by taxes. Giving the idea in people's heads, planting the seed of an idea in people's heads that the people that use fracture clinics must be serial killers. It also seems like a way to drive a wedge between people, though, as well. So, by picking the setting of college campuses, you could imagine that whilst all the young Americans were learning about themselves and about the world around them, whilst also studying, they're also then learning that people are intrinsically evil and that to never help somebody when they need help, destroying society from the inside, from a few generations away. And look at what's happening now. People hate each other, mate. And is it because they made up the story of Ted Bundy fucking killing people on college campuses, betraying the trust, burning that bit in the brain that tells people you can trust most people around you. Most people are probably fine, but they're getting rid of that. And the society that they tried to show the older generations in sitcoms at the time, that wasn't there because the younger generations weren't believing in any of that, and they weren't watching telly. They were out taking drugs and watching watching telly in bars like Sports and that, being influenced by the adverts in there, and just not watching TV like the parents were. Another way that Bundy may have been able to have been viewed, if you like, as a media stooge or an actor playing the part to cover up for the murders of people, it could be that imposing as disabled, albeit maybe not disabled, that's probably not the right word, temporarily injured. But the big they never seem to have been fond of disabled people, do they? They used to bundle them into asylums, call them names that we now know are derogatory towards them. Disabled people have got an hard enough life as it is, but maybe there was the beginnings of an underlying sentiment of acceptance among the general American population. But by having Bundy unable to use his arm, maybe it set back the public image of disabled people in the eyes of, in the eyes of the American public. Maybe they'd started to look down again on people who couldn't use all of the limbs. Maybe it pushed it back by a few years. Bundy and all was also involved in politics as well to a degree. He was a voluntary campaigner, right? This is what he's jotted down as. And TV shows love to dwell on it as well. They love to bring that up like it's important, but realistically, politics seems to mean fuck all, especially for the voluntary campaigners. You've probably seen them recently knocking on your doors and that for the elections. They're not real people. They're not being paid. They don't mean anything. They're just cannon fodder for whatever person's trying to get this high paid job. And then the cushy job of sitting in an office all the time. What if Bundy's role though was to try and, within his political party, was to try and increase the crime rate in certain areas to make his party's opposition seem weaker? Then that means he's still a serial killer, but he's a serial killer potentially on the payroll of a political party. Just as a little thought nugget for you there. Or maybe was it in order to help his party, he committed the crimes in his party's own constituencies to try and help them get more funding for policing, or to try and make these parties be able to have an excuse to reach out to the FBI, because the FBI might have been leaning on them to say, look, we need federal cover for all this, we need a database, a national database of all the crimes. And some areas were like, yeah, I'm fully into it, but because the majority of the police departments maybe in that county or in that state weren't into it, they needed people like Bundy to be doing this. There's loads of possibilities, mate, loads. Let's have a song though. This is Greatness by Khan. Ted Bundy isn't the only jab at healthcare that the media have had using a meat puppet. Harold Shipman comes to mind. He was a doctor in England that he did in loads of old women, mate. Now this seems like a great way to ready the population for doctors being bad at the jobs, GPs, not being any good at what they do, spreading the seeds for the beliefs that they don't actually care. And look what's happening now, mate. Right now, not enough doctors. No one can get a doctor's appointment because there's not enough time. There's not enough doctors. And that goes to show that they managed to have some effect with the news coverage of Harold Shipman. They were able to put people off becoming a doctor. Either the psychopaths who knew that they'd now get caught if they become a doctor because they want to kill people, or people that genuinely wanted to help people but didn't want to be associated with the likes of Harold Shipman. There's lots of stuff now as well that suggests the NHS is being dismantled so that the gap in the market can be filled by like an American-style healthcare system. But for this to happen in its entirety and to be accepted by the public, they're going to have to destroy the people's trust in the NHS and the help that it provides. So if you think you're going to, have some mental old man kill your mum while some fat nurse tries to kill your baby so that she can bring it back to life and look like the hero, that's already begun, mate. That's things that have happened. Is it past the point of fixing it? People already think them things now. So is there anything that can be done to change people's views of the NHS staff being nothing more than bloodthirsty murderers? Now I suppose only time will tell. Now that's just 3 serial killers there though, innit? And even then 2 of the English ones. We're not even touched on all the American ones. One way that you could look at the media's depiction of the serial killers, especially the American ones, right, is their sexuality. They love to throw their sexuality into it, and I always thought it seemed unnecessary. We touched on it a bit in the Robert Badella episode. If you've not listened to that, go back and listen to that, and a little bit of the dentist episode feeds into that. But the way that the American media would use people's sexuality, especially criminals and villains like this, it just seems strange, innit? To explain that these fellas that are getting about killing were mostly gay in some way or another, be it, gay is in the same gender or bisexual or whatever it is, they liked a bit of both, whatever it was explained as, either closeted or simply suspected as being gay. It just feels like another way to play on people's sentiments and fears, because something I've always thought about the fear that people had about the children being gay. I can imagine back then a lot of parents were scared that the kid might be gay, not just because of how they would, all the fear of people being gay and the misunderstandings and the people didn't like gays or for whatever reason, but because of that, but in a different way. I think I think a lot of parents were probably worried the kid would be gay because of how the kid would then be treated by the world, because nobody's going to want the kid to have a hard life. And it seems like back then, being gay, it seemed like a surefire way to make your life more difficult. You know, I look at John Wayne Gacy, right? He was arrested for sodomy at some point in his life. And seeing as though we're talking about sexuality in John Wayne Gacy, I was thinking that if John Wayne Gacy wasn't a real person and was a character that was developed to fulfill the role of a serial killer, to allow, you know, new rules to come to pass, his name seems quite important, innit? John Wayne Gacy. Now, ignoring the fact that Gacy's got the word gay in it, you go on John Wayne. John Wayne was a manly man, innit? He was an actor in Western films. Not as in like American films, but American films about the Wild West. Maybe even for quite a while. Probably the pinnacle of manliness. So by having him forcibly fillet young men at gunpoint, dressing in a clown outfit and killing people in his home, you could argue that he was made up, maybe a way for the feminist agenda to start seeping into the mainstream, which is something that a lot of people on the internet seem to worry about, and people back then seem to really worry about. If he was a fake person, you've got to consider the name choices for all of them, and for this part, that point I'm making here, that they might not be real. Gacy seemed to have the most obvious pseudonym in it, because John Wayne, and then to have him committing crimes against gay people, and he was doing, you know, gay things. Because he was a bisexual man, he was, you know, but having John Wayne there, if they have made him up and he wasn't actually real. Anyway, speaking of feminism though, other than Rose West and Eileen Turner, I can't think of many female serial killers in it. So this could have been a way to try and create a wedge between people. Maybe all of the free love years had taken its toll and it had to end, and in order to get that final nail in the free love coffin and lay it to rest, they had to strike fear into promiscuous people by making them think that their potential lover might kill them. But that's all we're going to cover this week, guys. And I think that sets us up quite nicely there for a few shows. We've got, you know, the MK Ultra, we can have a little look at the Satanic Panic, maybe a little look at media, you know, the way that media spreads fear, various other CIA operations as well that I've noted down, and we'll see what fits in between as well, and that as well within those things. If whatever else comes up, we will have a look at. Don't forget as well, there's exclusive episodes on Patreon now. That's patreon.com/worldaroundyou. If you want to join that, you've got my new book, that's on there. It's on the website. If you can, buy it from Amazon. I get a little bit less money, but I don't mind. If loads of people go on Amazon and buy it, it'll bump it up the ratings, up the charts. It'd be really nice to see it in the top, you know, the top 10,000 books of the world or something. That'd be an amazing accomplishment for a book about torturing sloths. But take a look at my website as well. You know, there's always new stuff, new shirts and stuff like that. But anyways, I'll see you in a bit. Go and give a listen to Truth Seeking as well.
When was the last time you felt in control of your business finances? Expenses tracked, invoices sent, taxes ready. That's where Found comes in. Found brings your banking, bookkeeping, invoicing, and taxes together in one simple app. Manage expenses, invoice clients, send payments, and prep for tax time right where you bank. Join the hundreds of thousands who have already streamlined their finances with Found. Open a Found account for free at Found.com. That's Found.com. Found is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by Lead Bank, member FDIC.